Hello and good day. I'm very excited to tell you about what's coming up next week at the IASB meeting. I have 3 projects I want to talk to you briefly about: supplier finance arrangements, primary financial statements, and goodwill and impairment. So let's start out with supplier finance arrangements. I'm talking to you about this one first because it's the one that's furthest along. We're actually going to go into the permission to ballot process next week, and so I'm very enthusiastic about moving this one to the next step. And in this project, we're doing 2 things. We're trying to clarify the scope of arrangements that should be called supplier finance arrangements, and then we're also adding disclosures to IAS 7, Statement of Cash Flows, and IFRS 7, Financial Instruments. We're trying to make sure that there's transparency about any liquidity risk associated with these types of arrangements. So if you have a large supplier finance arrangement and there's some risk of that arrangement going away, what impact would that have on your operations and your business? And so we're going to propose adding those disclosures. So stay tuned. We expect this one to move into the balloting phase after deliberations next week. The next project is one of my personal favorites: primary financial statements. And I've been a standard setter for a long time, but in this project we actually have preparers, auditors, and users saying, when are you going to have it done? And that almost never happens. So we're very excited about the discussions next week. We're having some significant deliberations. We're focused on hearing the outreach that the staff has been doing in 4 areas: subtotals in the performance statement, management performance measures, disclosures of operating expenses by nature, and then also unusual income and expenses. We've made some preliminary decisions, and the staff has been busy doing some very targeted outreach to understand the impact of these preliminary decisions so the board can continue with its deliberations. And the deliberations next week will move this important project forward in a very big way, so stay tuned for that. And as well, the last project I did want to mention to you is goodwill and impairment, and remind you that this project has 2 aims. The first aim is to improve disclosures about the performance of an acquisition post-acquisition. So companies do acquisitions, they account for the acquisitions, but sometimes there's a lack of clarity on whether or not the acquisition is actually performing the way management had hoped it would perform. So we are proposing some new disclosures and also an exemption when some of those disclosures might be commercially sensitive. But as well, there's some things that we want to fix about the impairment test, some annoyances that people have told us make the impairment test too difficult. And so those are coming next. But next week we'll be talking about some of these disclosures and the exemption. So that's a big snapshot of what's coming. There's a few other things too, so stay tuned. But remember, when we have the discussion and when we're finished making our deliberations, we'll be publishing the IASB update and the podcast so that you can quickly review that and understand which projects you may need to delve into deeper to understand more thoroughly. And lastly, I want a big thank you to all of you for all of the input you give us as we do our work. And remember, please don't stop. We need your input. We can't be successful without your input. So please keep doing it, and thank you very much.